computer, and we will start the video just so that I can give a little shout out and say hello to everybody, whether you're joining me West, East Coast, Central. It's good to have you guys, and I hope that you guys had a fun week one. We're about to jump into week two. If you can believe it, we're almost halfway through. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, and we're going to go ahead and go over these slides here. I'm actually going to do things a little backwards today. I'm going to do the demo first so that those of you who have to leave early can. But we're going to be talking about a lot of design principles today that you will be graded on. So if you don't have time to stay after the demos, definitely make sure you catch the second half of the recording because you will be held accountable for it and graded on it. So let's talk about week one first. How did it go? How did you feel it went? How was the assignment? We had a pretty loaded assignment. Good news is this week is not as bad. I guess depends on how you look at it. But what did you think of the logo designs? I tried to give everyone some good detailed feedback. There was a lot of just common mistakes and errors, things that you just can't really teach, but just kind of helping you critique your work a little bit. So take that feedback. You are welcome to resubmit. Just make sure that you action everything on the resubmission policy before you turn it back in. You do need to either visit me during a multi-session to sign off on it, or you got to pass it off with a tutor at the Student Success Center. So meaning you have to show them all your feedback and go through the comments and try to have them make sure that everything was actioned before submitting it. So, oh, good, Lynn. I'm glad you got those in. Perfect. And again, if you watching at home, if you guys haven't had a chance to turn it in, you do have until this Saturday. There'll be a 20% late deduction on the grade, but students prefer this way over getting a 0 on it. I mean, it's just a few points off, but you get a grade for it, and it doesn't hurt you too much in the end. So definitely take the time if you need to turn in late work. Are there any questions from week one? Anything that you want to review or go over? So Crystal said it was a challenge, only felt confident with about 50% of the end results, but yes, glad for resubmission. That's why I offer them. Very seldom does any designer get their logo designs right the first time. Even I go through several drafts of logo designs before I end up with a final product. And so, yeah, I think it's important to be able to resubmit. The reason why I allow it is because I want you to learn from, not just from mistakes, because it's not so much making mistakes, but where you can improve and how you take a good design to the next level. And so that's what I'm all about as far as the grading feedback is how can we, okay, you have a good start, a good base, how do we take this to the next level and make it stand out from the rest? How do you make this look professional instead of just letters on a page? So that's kind of where I'm coming from with it. So yes, resubmissions are great. That's why I offer them. So hopefully you all take advantage of that. And again, just check out the resubmission policy under the announcement section of the course homepage. Any other questions or comments about week one? Yes, Crystal. So Crystal had some trouble getting, he had a heck of a time getting your fonts added to Illustrator. So did you get that resolved, Crystal? Were you able to get some help from the Student Success Center? I know one or two students, Google, okay. Well, that helps too. I know one or two students had some trouble with it. If you've never downloaded fonts on your computer before, it can kind of be a little confusing, just kind of following the steps, knowing how to add it to your font book. It's always good to get a head start on the assignment, you know, early in the week so that when Thursday does roll around, you can come to the multi-session. So hopefully we don't run into any more problems like that. But if you have any font problems, do let me know. Maybe take a screenshot so I can see what's going on. Or you can visit the Student Success Center and any one of the tutors there can help. Oh, interesting. Yeah, well, it should. That's what's odd. It should carry over. But I'm glad you got it resolved. So that's wonderful. Hopefully, you know, once you have them downloaded, you won't have to download them again. And really, you only need about 1 or 2 fonts. You don't need to download all of them. So just the ones you're going to be working with in your design. Yeah, adding them to the font book is a step that you got to take. I wish they had more written instructions on, you know, from start, you know, from the point you download to how to get them added in. But hopefully we don't have any more trouble with that. All right, well, let's talk about week 2. Has anyone looked at week 2 yet? Do we even know what's going on? I know it's the first of the week, so probably not, and that's okay. This week is not going to be as design intensive as week 1. Week 1, you had 8 logos to design, plus you had to do some typesetting. So it was a little crazy and a little busy for those who might have started a little later in the week. But good news is this week we only have 1 design assignment, and that's to create a grand opening invitation. And then the other assessment too is to write a research paper. So hopefully everyone will get, you know, straight A's on that research paper. I will be grading according to word count, and I'm a stickler on word count. So if you're 1 word off, you're going to fall short in the grade. You'll get some points deducted. So please make sure you hit that minimum word count, and that's all in the grading rubric. I've also added a section on the grading rubric of how to save your assignment. You'll be graded on if you saved it properly. So that's also in the grading rubric. I know week 1 we didn't have that, so I've added that to week 2. So that's something new to keep an eye out for. But before you submit your assignment, look at the grading rubric and just make sure you hit all those points on the rubric so that you know there's no surprises and that you are, you know, you're confident that you're going to get those points. So I just wanted to point that out. So that is up as well. And then we're going to be talking today about how to create a hierarchy of information. What does it mean to have visual hierarchy? And so we're going to get into that, and then how to lay out a design, and then how do you grab the reader's attention with a beautiful design? That's easier said than done, and it's usually a learned art. There is a science to the art, and so a lot of people don't understand that until they start studying visual art and graphic design. And so I think our eyes will be open today that there's always a method to the madness. There's always needs to be a purpose to placement. Wherever you place an element needs to have a purpose. It's kind of the same thing with logo design. Whatever element you put on that logo needs to have a purpose. And then number 3, we're going to design specifically for print. So I'll show you how to upload the PDF and make sure you have those crop marks, the printer marks on there. And then I'll demo some grand opening poster designs for you. So that is our to-do list. I'll be doing things a little bit backwards. I will do the demo first. I'll get into some of the lecture, and then we're going to start getting into the design portion. But I did want to touch on hierarchy a little bit because it is very important, and it is kind of what you're going to be graded on mostly this week. Since we only have 1 design assignment, I'm going to be grading pretty strict on, you know, did you fulfill what we talked about in class? And so this is what I want you to take out of it before we start going into the design portion. And at any point, feel free to interrupt me, ask questions, whatever you want to do. And I do want to welcome Jennifer and Robin, who just joined us. So thank you for coming. And let's talk about this. So create an attention-grabbing poster. That's assignment 2. So how do you do this? It's easier said than done, like I said, but you are a professional. You're training to be a professional. And you've probably made a poster or 2 in your time, maybe in Word, or maybe not a poster, but an invitation or some kind of a flyer. If you have any of you done anything like that, made a flyer or an invitation or something at any point? Okay, so you're kind of vaguely familiar with what they are and what they need to include. Perfect. Okay, so that's good. This may be your first opportunity to design it in Illustrator or InDesign. So I want to touch on a few points. So whether you're creating a poster for a restaurant event or a Toy Story event, you kind of need to grab the customer's attention. So you need to inform the readers about the event, and you also have to encourage the readers to participate. What does that mean? Well, you need to it needs to be engaging enough that they want to attend, or they want to call or RSVP, or whatever the call to action is on that particular poster or invitation. So here's the thing. You don't have to create cheesy posters. This is totally up to you as far as design, as far as how you want to design it. And you don't actually have to be a designer to create a beautiful event poster. So if you feel like you're not quite, up to par to being a designer yet, it doesn't matter. There's just, like I said, there's a science and a formula that we're going to follow, and you're going to apply that to your design, and it should all come together very naturally. And it doesn't have to take a long time to create one. So I don't want you to overthink it, but it does allow you, this assignment, a little bit more creativity in terms of how you want to style your typography and how you want to place elements on a page. So if you follow some basic principles of good design, and when in doubt, I want you to start with a solid template, then I think you'll be set. So there's a hierarchy of information here at the bottom. If you can see this, it's in small print. It says the first step 1 is name of the event. That's what's on the top. Then the second one is the company, or maybe the department title. Whoever's throwing the event will be, level 2. Level 3, it's just a short description of the event, maybe a catchy tagline. If something stands out, maybe if you have an A-list singer like Christina Aguilera, all that is in your text, and all the text has been provided for you. Now here's the tricky thing. You can't edit the text, so you're going to have to use what they give you. You can't cut out words and leave information out. You do have to use all the text that they provide. However, we can style it in such a way that it reads really well. And then the next, level 4 is date, time of the event. Level 5 is where it's being held. And then level 6 is kind of the fine print information. If necessary, where can they find more information, contact info, all that is at the very, very bottom. Now, as we move down these levels, you're getting smaller and smaller and smaller in your size of font, okay? Linda's asking, can we do one for events that we go to annually already? No, Linda, actually for the assignment, you are given you're already given some pre-written text that you have to format. It's for the company. You get to choose one logo design from week 1 that you designed from one of those 4 companies. And that will be the company that's throwing the event, and then the assignment's already given you a block of text that you have to format. So we don't have that much freedom as far as, content and what it is, what kind of event. It's a grand opening event for one of the companies that you've designed for, the Jumping Spider Toy Store Company, Toscana Italian Bistro, the Paramount Computer Company, and then Bank of Lancaster. So one of those 4 companies, pick a logo design. I would choose the best one, the one that you did the best on, and go with that. If I gave you any feedback on that logo that you're using, you do need to make and apply those changes, because you'll be graded on whether or not you applied the feedback. So there will be changes that need to be adjusted there. But this is what I mean by hierarchy of information, okay? It has to grab the reader's attention with a beautiful design. And here's the thing. It's in levels. So as we're moving down the level, do we get larger or smaller in our size? Smaller, right? Exactly. So we get smaller. So I want you to think, even look at this graphic right here on my slide, attention grabbing event poster. That is the largest information on this page. It's the headline. This should say grand opening in your mind. This should be, grand opening should be very large on your poster. And then level 2 is kind of the sub header or the subtitle or whatever secondary information. That's the company that's throwing it, or perhaps it's who's throwing it is probably the best way to describe that. And then level 3 is just kind of a short description. It gets even smaller block of text. So it's kind of this upside down pyramid concept, where as you move down the pyramid, you're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I did want to show you a little visual here. Let's see if I can find it. Look at this one here. This is kind of the concept. So do you see this? The first section of the text, in this way, readers are cued as to what to read first. But when you tell them what they're reading first, that should be the largest. That should be the most important information on the page. Usually it's the title or the headline or the event. that's going on. And then second, then third, and then as you move down, you're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So this is what I mean by the upside down pyramid, kind of the visual hierarchy. You're giving the most importance to the largest information on the page is the most important. And then as you move down, less and less important information, you get smaller. Kind of like the opening to Star Wars, exactly. Very good. Here's another example. This is visual hierarchy tells the reader's eyes or the customer's eyes where it goes first. You're directing my eyes. When I look at your layout, you're telling me what is most important and you're telling me where to go next. So if you haven't realized it, that's what this sign is doing. Your eyes go here, then here, and then isn't that fascinating how your eyes moved in order of the way that they designed it. Now notice the largest information was first, then the secondary information was second in size, and then the last information that wasn't very important was the smallest in size. So again, this is the concept of visual hierarchy. This is what I'm talking about. And it adds more interest to the layout. If everything was the same size and the same color, wouldn't that be so boring? I mean, I don't think it would be very interesting. So it also, using visual hierarchy and using size to grab attention and direct the eye, you're also kind of creating some art on a page just with the typography alone. Okay, so let's look at number 2. So this is grabbing the reader's attention. Move this off. Okay, so how do you make your poster attention grabbing? This is the question that everyone asks. There are a couple of key ways, and they all fall under the basic tenets of good graphic design. So if you're not sure where to start, we'll do a demo, but what you want to do is make the title the main focus of the poster. So ideally, you want your title text to be readable from a distance, okay? Let me show you another example. So this is how you grab readers' attention. So what is the main focus of the poster on the left? Can anyone tell me? Picnic, right? That's the event. The picnic, summer picnic, right? The picnic is the event that's being thrown. That is the main focus of the poster. So in your case, this should say grand opening, right? Grand opening should be just as large as picnic on your layout. So as a rule of thumb, your title text should be about 3 times the size of your subheader and your body text. So if it's not 3 times that size, then it's too small. So try to, and don't be afraid to use the whole top of your page for your main headline. So again, what is the largest part of the design on the right? What's the main focus of the poster? Potluck, right? That's the name of the event. So again, imagine this as you're designing your grand opening poster. Potluck would be replaced with grand opening. Picnic would be replaced with grand opening. So it would be just as large and just as nice and colorful, and that would grab my attention. So just kind of a simple trick, when you're designing titles, you kind of want to use either the grid function or making sure your smart guides are turned on, just so that your text is evenly aligned with the edges of the page. You really want to make sure you get everything aligned. You look at the perfect, beautiful alignment of the design on the left, all the text lines up, even though they're different size and maybe a different font, they all line up very flush on the left, and that's because they're using rulers and guides for that. So that's kind of the trick to helping your design look very professional. Okay, so let's talk about choosing the best font. The style of font that you choose should reflect the theme and mood of the event. So if you used a sans serif font in your logo design for your company, then you probably want to start out with that in your poster layout. So in general, serif fonts have that classic fancy feel because they have those little line embellishments, and those would be really appropriate for the restaurant or maybe for the bank. Sans serif fonts tend to have a more modern feel. So sans serif fonts are fonts sans the serif embellishment, and so they're just lean, mean text machines, and they can be used really versatilely for any of the companies, but they are more contemporary, so maybe more for a computer company, more for a toy store, perhaps a bank even, and really they could be used for restaurants. So they're very versatile, which makes them like I said, that mean text machine. They're just very universal. So you could, for example, let me show you this, use serif fonts to give this acoustic night poster a really folksy feel. So we used a serif font for the acoustic night headline up here. We're at the top. And we contrasted it with the body text, which is a sans serif font. So it added some visual interest by just changing up the font. Now, the rule of thumb is to only use 1 or 2 fonts in your design. You can use different font styles like bold and italic and regular, but you definitely don't want to go hog wild with all different kinds of fonts. So you want to use it appropriately and tastefully. Remember, keep it simple. Don't try to add a lot of fanfare to your design and think the more you add, the better it will look. It's the less you add that makes it look better. So let's take another look at this poster design. So choosing the best font, if you use sans serif fonts for a modern event like a business conference, or in our case, it's a grand opening, this would be a really appropriate way to do it. This is a beautiful, clean, modern, contemporary look. You can also pair up different fonts on your poster. So you can take the example right here, which tastefully combines 3 different fonts in the title and the subheader. Now, I don't recommend doing that. We're all beginners and we can kind of muddle it up. So I do recommend maybe sticking to 1 or 2 fonts. But, and I think the assignment calls for 2 contrasting fonts. So I would just stick to that unless you're feeling really confident in your ability to take more than that and style it. But as a general rule of thumb, use no more than 3 different fonts on your poster. So like I said, too many different fonts can make your design look really cluttered. But in this case, look how clean it is. Don't be afraid of white space around. It's okay to have some white space. So just wanted to kind of emphasize this part of things. So now you're supposed to, focus on a visual, use one focus visual. Are we allowed to use graphics in our assignment? Negative, right, Crystal? No photography, no images, same rules apply as the logo designs, okay? However, you can use background colors and maybe a little bit of background design, but you cannot use graphics or images. It all has to be Illustrator based, so vector based, okay? And they have to be your creations. I will show you how to do a tasteful one. I'll do 2 demos on how to create 2 different contrasting backgrounds so that it gives your layout some depth and interest, but the rest needs to be purely typographic, okay? So the message of your poster needs to be visually interesting. And the way that this poster accomplishes it is it's very clean and the focus is just on, even though they have those lights, it is just on the night sky. It's on that background color and on the font, okay? So just kind of wanted to point that out, that there can't be any graphics. That's the big challenge. But it is possible to create a very nice, pleasing layout. In fact, I'm going to be demoing this picnic one so that you can see, and I'll also show you how to do a different one as well. Are there any questions so far? All right, so let's talk about color and then we'll get into a demo real quick. So the whole point of color is to create a mood, right? Just as the choice of font that you make or the way that you style your typography can affect mood, the color scheme that you choose should reflect the mood of the event that you're promoting. So in this case, just based off of the colors alone, you already can assume this is going to be a Halloween type of layout. So for example, this poster for Halloween costume contest uses the classic Halloween color combination, black, orange, and a little bit of light orange. Using this spooky ghost silhouette, readers or consumers can automatically deduce that this poster is for a Halloween event before they even read the text. So just based off of the visual alone and the colors, it kind of already is communicating the message. So that's the neat thing. The designers have also made the design more interesting by using a simple design hack, tilting the text. Now, I say this with caution because if you start going crazy with tilting, and I know some of us really enjoyed that exercise, rotating the fonts in our logo design, don't tilt it to the extreme. It needs to still be legible. You don't want to have to, you know, cock your head so that you can read what's going on. I wouldn't recommend doing it. Don't go overboard. Just kind of do it tastefully. So this is a design hack. You can tilt text to give it some interest. It does need to be, if you are going to do it, aligned properly. Okay? You can severely ruin your design if nothing is aligned. All right. But that is a really interesting way that you can get a neat effect. And then here's another one. So to tilt text using Illustrator or InDesign, you just simply rotate the text box. You just kind of hover your mouse over those anchor points, and it will allow you, it'll kind of curve, the arrow will curve, and you can kind of rotate your box. So this is kind of a way to add some visual interest. Now, if the event calls for it, you may even choose to go without colors. However, in this assignment, we do need to create a color poster. That's just part of the requirements. However, there are lots of different ways that you can use color to create mood. Here's another easy design hack. You can also use a semi-transparent color swatch to overlay on another color background to create some visual interest. Now, we're not going to be using a photograph like you see here, but I will be using a textured background to kind of give it some 2D effect there, and I'll show you how to do that in Illustrator. So the key is not to let the background image clutter up the text, which is why they're overlaying a colored box over it, because if they didn't, it'd be extremely hard to read because it's a busy picture. But by putting that overlay of colored box as an overlay, this allows you to read the font a lot easier, and it pops off the page a lot better. So it's not as busy of a background. Okay, and then another way to create a really good design is using borders. Make your designs more interesting by adding borders around sections of text. Look at this date here. They kind of boxed it out, and then they boxed out this other quote here. So this is automatically telling my eyes, hey, this is standing out for a reason. This must be important. Plus, it also looks cool. So this separates information, makes it easy to digest quickly, and it's very cool to look at. It gives some interest rather than just having all the text on a page all the same color. So you can also use a semi-transparent square overlaid on top of an image, and this will leave kind of a border around the square uncovered. This can create an image border. Again, we won't be using photography, but this is also a way to create some visual interest if you wanted to. So you can make a border very easily by just laying out a box in Illustrator. But let's talk about negative space, because negative space is something that we're sometimes afraid of. We kind of feel the need to fill every gap on the page, which is not the case. So in case you don't know what negative space is, can anyone tell me what that is? You've probably heard of it referred to as white space. Yeah, any space not being used. It's kind of that elbow room around your elements, right? So when your design is cluttered with too much text and too many images and icons, it not only looks less professional, but it also becomes really hard to read. So negative space allows the elements on your poster to breathe, and it makes for a sleeker, more modern design. So if you take this example that I've got up here, this uses simple shapes and plenty of negative space to create a very sleek, modern design. So this is a really cool, effective use of negative space. Now, I do want to point out the logo. Can anyone tell me where the logo is placed? Any guesses? Yeah, in the lower right corner. That's right, Linda. And look how small it is. I will warn you that students oftentimes feel they need, because they can't have any photography and images on their layout, they blow up their logo to be massive and to be the art of the page, when in fact it should be very small and be the less important information on the page. So the logo should be about the size that you see here. It should be very small, and somewhere, it can be on the top, it can be on the bottom, it can be in one of the corners. That's up to you as far as where you want to place it. It doesn't need to make sense, but it does need to be small. So it can't be the art of your page. Your typography needs to shine. That's the star of the show, okay? So I did want to point that out because that's also kind of a misconception. You should leave negative space between text around the margins of the page, definitely around the margins of the page. Don't put your text too close to the edge of the page. And then you want space between your graphics and your text. So leaving negative space also means that you will have to decide which information to style, which information to cut. In this case, we can't take out information from what you've been given, but you can choose how to block it, how to organize it, how to lay it out in sections or in groups so that it reads really well. This is a good thing. I don't fear, you know, having to use the text that you're given. Your poster will be more focused and convincing if every piece of information is included and is relevant. And you can make it relevant by how you style it. All right, so we're gonna, we have 2 more slides and then we're gonna go into the demo. If you're planning on printing out your poster, there are 2 different colors schemes that you're gonna have to be aware of, or I guess color libraries. One is RGB, and one is CMYK. Now the CMYK you're gonna be using for poster. This is designing specifically for print. So you kind of want to make sure that you're using the right color palettes from the get-go so that you don't get attached to a design that won't translate properly. RGB is only for display on the web. So if you laid something out in RGB and then you tried to print it out, it wouldn't translate. It would actually look much darker than what you had. So it's always good to print using CMYK in the first place. And as you can see, there's a huge difference, right, between the 2 color wheels. So if you look closely, it's pretty easy to see the difference. All right, and here's the kicker, choosing fonts. Now, you do have to choose fonts from your approved list that were given to you. You can't pick just any fonts for this. It has to be the approved list that you downloaded from week 1. Now, I know you may be tempted to use Comic Sans or Apple Chancery or some fun-looking font for your poster, but please try to restrain yourself. You will be graded on whether or not you use the pre-approved fonts for this. You are the professional. So you kind of need to hold yourself back from using those fancy curly whirly fonts. They are going to be hard to read from a distance. And a lot of students are tempted to use those curly fancy whirly fonts when it comes to designing for the restaurant. They think, oh, restaurant, they think fancy. That's not the case when it comes to design. So you want to pick a sans serif or a serif font for the restaurant. Try to avoid the curly, I mean, it's okay to use it maybe to highlight one thing, but it is not okay to use for the body text. It's not okay to use for the majority of the design. So just look at the following image here. This is going to really help you decide whether or not you should use a specific font for your poster. Exactly. So Linda says, so just be sure to use fonts you would use on a billboard. That's so true. And in fact, when you design something, if you stepped away from your computer a good, 20 feet, and if you can still make out what is being read on or what you've got on your computer, then maybe you've picked a good font. But when you're looking, especially a poster at a distance, it just needs to be very legible, okay? So I've kind of shown you the no's and I've kind of shown you the yeses. So hold yourself back when you feel tempted. There is other ways to go about this and make it look fancy. But you still have plenty of options for nice fonts that reflect the theme of your event. So there are a lot of options that you've got here. Now the size of the fonts need to kind of be between 24 and 48 points big. If it's too small, people won't be able to read it. And I'm talking about the headline here. It really, posters are meant to be designed or read from far away. So you really need large font. You need to think kind of like Linda said, like the billboard. So yeah, and Linda even says she makes her husband look at it across the room and see what he thinks. I think that's brilliant. If they can't read it, then it's either too fancy of a font or it's not clear enough or legible enough, and then you kind of have to adjust. But that's a great way to go about it, I think. All right, and then this will be our last slide until we jump into the demo, and then we'll come back and finish the rules that we need to learn. But when we're exporting, we're going to be exporting a PDF a little bit differently. Okay, so blurry pictures are very annoying. You need to make sure they're in 300 resolution. In this case, we're not using images, so you won't need to worry about that. But what you will need to worry about are bleed marks. And bleed in printing is when you have an image or an object or background color touching the edge of your page. It needs to bleed over the page, and I'll show you how to set up your bleed marks. And when you design a poster with an image that's flush with the edges of the poster, your printer will automatically leave kind of a thin white line around the edge of the poster like you see on the right. Sometimes it's not cropped very evenly, so that's why we encourage using bleeds so that you have an even color distribution all around your page. And this is mostly for printing purposes, but it's a good habit to get into, because if you've never done it before and you kind of go out in the industry, it'll be kind of a rude awakening, because if you have to print something and the job comes back wrong, then there you go. All right, so let's jump into the demo real quick. Do you guys have Illustrator up? Okay, go ahead and launch Illustrator if you don't already have it up. I'll give you guys just a few minutes to do that while I get mine up. Now you can, it does not specify whether or not you use Illustrator or InDesign for this. I'll be designing mine in Illustrator, so, well, yeah, I'll probably be doing my demos in Illustrator today. Layout can be done in InDesign, so it's up to you. I'll let you decide. But I'll show you how to set this up. So I'm going to grab my Illustrator. And let me share my screen. Give me 1 second. Switch over, switching gears here. All right. So before we go into the actual poster design, I'm going to show you a few basic tricks that you can use and effects that you can use to create an interesting background. First one is a textured background. So what you're going to want to do is just open up a new document in Illustrator. At this point, it does not matter what file size. We're just going to go over a few tricks. So to go ahead and message me once you have Illustrator up and ready, you have a new document open. I'll wait to proceed until you guys are ready. Okay, Linda's ready. How about the rest of you? Robin, Crystal, Jennifer, Ashley. Perfect. Okay, so it looks like everyone's ready. So you got your new document up. What you're going to do is grab your rectangle tool. And I usually like drawing it from edge to edge. And we are going to create a gradient. Now, I don't want you to go too crazy on the gradient, but a very subtle gradient is very tasteful and adds some depth to your layout. So what you can do to create a gradient is if you drew it and it's black and white, let's go to my gradient here, window drop-down menu, click on gradient, and your box will pop up right here. Okay. You can either choose to do a linear or a radial, and each one will give you a different effect. So I'm going to do linear, and you're going to want to make sure you're on your fill box and not your stroke. And what's neat about this gradient slider is you can adjust it, and you can watch the changes kind of happen live as you're adjusting it. If you want a lighter gradient, you want a more darker gradient, kind of whatever you want. If you want to change the color, you'll click on the gradient slider at the bottom, double click on it, and it'll kind of pop up this box here. If it's black and white, you'll need to pick a swatch and then go to the painter's palette, this color palette here, and then you can kind of slide and change the color of that particular slider. Once you've settled on a color, then you can double click on the other color and go through that and kind of adjust it. Gives you a different look and effect. So that's how you apply a gradient. So I'll give you a minute to work on this so you can learn how to do that. I'll give you guys about 2 minutes to kind of apply a gradient. If you get stuck, let me know and I'll have you share your screen. If you already have a gradient, go ahead and share your screen, or let me know if you want to share your screen and you can kind of show the class what you've done and how you did it. Does anyone need me to run by that again? So I'll do it really quick. So say you have, let's see. So say you have a, just a regular box here. And it happens to be a different color. If you wanted to apply a gradient, you'll click on the gradient tool or double click on it and it will pop up here. You'll click on the square box. You'll make sure your fill is in the foreground, meaning the front. And then you will click on your gradient sliders. Now, this will adjust how light or how dark the gradient is. If you want to change the color, you double click on the gradient slider itself. If it's black and white, then you will have to pick a swatch and then you can go into the color and then adjust, the shade and the depth there. And then you'll have to click on each one, the other gradient slider. Now the idea here is to do a very subtle color differentiator, like two very similar colors, so that you just get a little bit of depth. You don't want the rainbow. That's not what we're trying to go for. We're just trying to create a little bit of depth here. Okay, and then by clicking on your gradient tool, you can adjust the direction of the gradient at any angle, which is really cool because it can give you a different look entirely. Just like that. So does anyone have a gradient they'd like to share, or is anyone running into trouble? Just let me know if you guys are ready to move on. Would anyone like to share their screen so we can see the gradient that you used? Okay, Ashley, I will go ahead and stop the share. Go ahead and share your screen. Let's take a look at your gradient. Beautifully done. Excellent. So then if you have an extra slider on there and you don't want that extra slider, you just click and drag it down and it will delete, or select it and then click the trash can if you don't want it there. Great job on creating a gradient. Now, can you change the direction of the gradient for me? Do you know how to do that? Click on the gradient tool. If you click on the gradient tool on your toolbar, click on your toolbar, the gradient tool on the right column, right, one more down, right there, click that. And now if you click anywhere on the page and click and drag anywhere at any direction, you don't have to grab the bar, just click anywhere and click anywhere on the page. So at the top of the page, click at the top of the page, Ashley, and click and drag. There you go. So now by doing that, that now changes the direction of your gradient. So at any angle, you don't have to just grab the bar. You can click and drag anywhere, kind of experiment what direction you want with your gradient. Excellent job. Very good. Very well done. All right. Would anyone else like to share? Great job, Ashley. Okay, Linda, go ahead and share your screen. Let's take a look at what you created. Ooh, I like that one. That purple pink is a nice subtle gradient that works really well. Very nice. And then can you change the direction of your gradient as well? Yeah, excellent. Great job. So even with that, just make sure your stroke is turned off so that you don't get that black border. But I love the color that you chose. Excellent job. You guys are quick. Great job. Anyone else? Anyone else like to share? If not, we'll go ahead and move on. Keep your gradient because you're going to need that for the next step. Okay. So now that you've created your gradient, what we're going to do is create, you see this texture on my background here? This adds a really cool depth to my layout. So not only do I have the gradient, the color giving me depth, but I'm going to also add some texture to my background. So the way you can accomplish that is just by grabbing your rectangle tool again. Now I like doing it kind of off to the side, just so that you're not drawing on your gradient and get it all confused. What you want to do with this is turn off your stroke, and then for your fill, you want to have a gray fill. Just a light gray fill is all you'll need. And then you'll go to Effect, Texture, and you want Grain. So what that does is it brings up this dialog box. Now, can you see the dialog box pop up? Can you guys see that? Okay. So with the dialog box popped up, you're going to make sure the setting says grain. Then at the bottom, the grain type, you want it to say sprinkles. And then I kind of picked a 90-50 ratio of intensity and contrast here. You can experiment to whatever you want. As you move the sliders, this will change, the artboard will change. So you can kind of see what effect you're getting. So the lower my intensity, kind of the darker the grain will be. And the higher my intensity, the lighter the grain will be. And then if you hit contrast, it kind of shows you the dark or light for your background. I like it to be kind of just right in the middle. So I'm going to keep it at 50. And then if you hit OK, you created this texture that you can now place over your gradient. And for the opacity, I'm going to bring it down quite a bit. So I'm going to lower my opacity on it. Now, if you're getting kind of a weird color, I do recommend lightening up the gray. So you can go here and almost pick a lighter gray, or you can pick a darker gray. Just kind of experiment with it. And kind of place that over. So it gives you an interesting effect there. Yeah, I can help you, Crystal. Great question. So Crystal is a little stuck on the how do you get color for your gradient. This one always threw me for a loop. If you'll share your screen, I'll show you. This should be a common problem for those watching at home too, because usually Illustrator will default to a black and white gradient. Okay, so if you double click on one of your sliders with your gradient box open, the slider in your gradient box to the right, if you double click on one of them, and then you can either pick a color or you can move the sliders, kind of whatever color you want to start out with. Or if you have a pre-selected swatch that you want to pick from, you can just click the other menu, but this is how you'll click. So pick a color. You wanted to go with blue, pick blue. If you wanted green, pick green. So just select a color. There you go. And now double click on the other slider. And now pick another color. And usually want kind of a shade off from what you got. You don't want to do two different colors. Yeah. And that will give you the gradient effect you're looking for. Excellent. So then, yeah, you can adjust your slider, or if you just click anywhere on the page, click and drag anywhere on the page, that will adjust the direction of your gradient. So the longer yeah, you can kind of experiment and see. Each one will give you a different effect. The longer the line, the more dramatic, or the shorter the line, the more dramatic. The longer the line, the less dramatic of a difference. So excellent job. Great job. Good question too, because sometimes that can be a little confusing. So you just click on those gradient sliders to help you. So I want you to practice doing the texture background, if you will. You can also get a different effect by going to Effect, Texture, Grain, Apply New Effect. Kind of see what each setting will give you. Effect, Texture, Grain. And then you can give yourself a little bit more intensity if you want to see the grainy part of it. And there you go. Yeah, it makes a really cool effect. It almost adds a little bit of dimension and depth to your layout, especially on top of that gradient. So that gives a really cool base for your layout. So go ahead and practice that. If you'd like to share your screen and show me what you've got, show me your cool grainy effect, your textured effect. And you'll notice under the effect, there's lots of different other things you can play around with. But we don't want to get too extreme. We don't want to distract from the typography, but and let me know if you guys would like to share your screen. Okay, Linda, you'll share. Go ahead and click share screen. Let's see what you got. So really nice layout. And I can see that your texture is on there, very subtle texture, excellent job. As you lighten the opacity, you'll be able to, if you lighten the opacity and increase or decrease your intensity, it'll give you, you'll see less of the color because you want a really light color. Yeah, and then you'll see more of your grainy. So it just depends on what effect you want, but excellent job. Good job applying texture to this. Great job, Linda. All right, so we're going to close this out. Would anyone else like to share? Okay, and it looks like Hillary joined us. Welcome, Hillary. Thanks for coming. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on. And thank you for those who are willing to share your screens. It's always more fun to see someone else doing it. We're going to do one more demo. This demo will also be in Illustrator, and I'm going to show you how to create vector sun rays, okay? And I don't know if you've ever seen this. You've probably seen this effect before on posters or on other designs, but I'm going to show you how to do that here, and I'm going to close out of some of my screens. I've got far too many windows open, so bear with me for just a minute. I'm going to close out of my gradient, out of my layers. Okay. All right. So first thing you want to do is grab your shapes tool. Try to expand my screen here. There we go. All right, so first you're going to have Illustrator open. You can either do this by specific dimensions if it's a little easier for you, and I can step you through that, but we're going to grab our ellipse tool. Hold down Shift as you click and drag, and that will constrain the proportions because you don't want this misproportion. You want it to look like a squished oval or something. So you'll hold down Shift, click and drag, you'll draw a circle. All right. It doesn't really matter how big your artboard is. This is just for the tutorial. So using your ellipse tool, you're going to want to make sure that the fill is turned off. So turn off the fill, and you want a black stroke around your circle. So no fill, but a black stroke. Okay, so then what we're going to do is from the stroke tab, you're going to go to up here. You're going to make sure that your stroke width is set to 50. And then you're going to want to check the dashed line. And so an easy way to do this is if you go to your window drop-down menu, click on your stroke box right here, and then click on dashed line. So then click on dashed line. And then for your first dash value, I'm going to use 8 point. That might be a little bit better. Oops. All right. So if you have these values, so I set it at 8 point, maybe what 5 point gives us. You can any of the points really, but 8 point will probably give us a good one. Maybe 10. Try 11. 10 might be good. Okay, and then what you're going to want to do is change your meter limit to 4. And that should be about all the settings you need. So we're almost done. So now that you have this box selected, you're going to go to Object, Expand, and then go to Object, Expand one more time in case it makes you do it a second time. All right, and now this is going to make the points editable. Object, I need to do it one more time. All right, so each point now is editable, okay? Which is a good thing. And I will type this out for you so that you can follow the directions. Oops, there's the web design tutorial if you'd like it. It's a little easy. I'll be posting this in the announcements. So once you have this one, you're going to go to your warp tool. Your warp tool is under your width tool. It's kind of one of those hidden tools. So you click on your warp tool. The idea is to double click on it, and then you want to make the width a little larger than the inner circle. That's kind of the idea. So I'll hit OK. You want it to be proportionate too. So I'm going to do 5 by 5. We'll see if that'll be good enough for my, that's too big. Let's do 3 by 3. There we go. So my circle is slightly larger than my inner circle, and that's kind of the object here. So if I, so now that I've got that, so from the tools menu, I'm going to click and then hold the warp tool, and it's going to kind of appear. I want the pucker tool here. I'm going to click down, and you'll see my points start to come together like that. And that gives me my starburst effect. Okay, so that was a lot of steps. Just follow that tutorial right there that I've copy and pasted for you. So before using this tool, you just want to make sure you double click on the pucker icon, and the new window will appear, and just make sure you change your settings so that it's all approximate. So I'll do that one more time for you. We'll do it together. I'm going to delete this. Grab your circle, your ellipse tool, hold down Shift, click and drag. You want a transparent fill and a black stroke. You want to change your stroke weight to about 50. Meter limit set to 4. Dashed line. You want the align dashes to corners, this far right one. And then about 8 point would do, be nice. 8 to 12 really, it just depends on how big of a starburst you want. Then you're gonna go find your warp tool and your pucker tool. So click on pucker tool, double click on that, and this will allow you to change the dimensions. You want an even width and height, and the idea here is to have a larger circle than your inner circle. And it's not quite large enough, so I'm gonna go 6 by 6. There we go. So now I can hover over it. Hold on, Illustrator's wigging out here. Okay. Before I do this though, I did forget to expand the object. So go to Object, Expand Appearance, and you might need to do it twice. You want to make sure that fill is deselected and only the stroke is selected. Okay, now you can go to your pucker tool and click on the inside of the circle until the points meet. Now, each time you do this, at whatever angle you decide to do this, you'll get a different effect, which is kind of cool. But in this case, we just want the starburst look. You kind of want it as centered as possible. And then the way that you would use this is you could give it a color. Let's see, let's give it a light color. I'm gonna go light gray. And then in lieu of my textured background, I'm going to put this here. And if you change the opacity on it and kind of expand it, you get kind of a neat effect as your background. And I need to go even lighter because I really want it to be subtle. You don't want it to be too stark. I'm even going to go 4% on this. All right. And this is how I'll get my really cool background. And you want to make sure it extends beyond the page on all sides. I'm going to try to center this design. Just like that. Now that gives it even more depth as well. Are there any questions on this tutorial? You could probably follow it step by step a little easier than watching me, but I wanted to make sure that you understood the concept. Are there any questions? Are you stuck on anything? Pretty straightforward. Okay, so I'll give you a chance to create your starburst. I'll give you a few minutes. We're actually going to be taking our 10-minute break, so I want you to play around with it. Real quick though, when you have expanded your starburst, what's different as opposed to Illustrator and InDesign is InDesign you can kind of shape everything to your artboard. In this case, you can't in Illustrator without making it misproportioned. So you're going to need to create a clipping mask to clip that starburst, to keep that starburst from going over everything. You're going to create a no-fill box, right click and make sure it's in the front, arrange it to the front. And then you're going to select everything, including that box. You're going to right click and hit clipping mask. And what that does is it fits everything inside of that box. You can still see it when you hover over your elements, but this way it's not hanging off your page onto other artboards. So that's a neat way to do a clipping mask. So you can see these two different backgrounds add some real interest and depth to your layout. So this is kind of a fun way to kind of play around. Are there any questions about these tutorials so far? All right, if there's no questions at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to move on and go ahead and take our 10-minute break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the poster design visual hierarchy, and we'll jump into the poster design, the actual poster design. I'll show you how to upload it as a PDF, how to get those printer marks, and get it ready to submit. So go ahead and stop the share here. I'll share the whiteboard, and we will adjourn and come back in 10 minutes. All right, guys, so we're back. Yeah, exactly, Crystal. So Crystal's asking, after you get the starburst effect, what do you do? Do you just enlarge the circle? And that's exactly what you do. You enlarge it until it covers the entire page. As you can see, it overlaps my page, which is why I needed to create a clipping mask. So I'll show you. You see it kind of overlapping. I expanded it. Hold down Shift as you expand it so that it constrains the proportions. And then you'll want to create a clipping mask. There's no stroke or fill. So Crystal, why don't you go ahead and share your page so I can see what you're referring to? So you just click on share screen and we'll take a look at it. Let's see. Okay, so if you click on your arrow, or click on your arrow so that the fill switches with the stroke, that little curved arrow, yeah, click on that. Okay, perfect. So now you can give it any color. Double click on your fill box, or you can do that too. Just click on a color. I picked a light gray. Depending on what you want to. I picked a light gray, so if you want to move that little circle up to the gray area, click and drag it, and then hit OK. Once you get to the color that you want, I just did a very light color. It was the object of, it was kind of what I was going for. It needs to be really light. And then I changed the opacity. I went all the way down to like 4 or 6%. So by clicking on the opacity and giving it a really low light opacity, because the idea is you just want it to be super subtle. And then you can put it over your background. You can adjust it once you see. Hold down Shift as you click and drag it. Just kind of make it larger than life. Yeah, just like that. Yeah, and then kind of position it over your background. It's meant to kind of go over a solid background. So if you have like even that green, you can just practice. You want to put it over that green. It'll show up nicely. Or you could put it over a white background too. That's another idea. Kind of just position it there, and then you'll want to create a clipping mask so it doesn't hang over the edge. That's a cool effect. I like that. Grab your rectangle tool. And this is how we create a clipping mask. So we'll hold down rectangle tool. Now click from edge to edge of your page. Same, well, no, you want it to be the same size as your artboard, not your circle. So just go to the edge of your pages. Take the fill off. No stroke, no fill on your clipping mask box. There you go. And then just, with your selection tool, make sure your anchor points just go from corner to corner on your artboard. It can't be any larger. It has to be the exact same size as your artboard. There you go. Make sure it, same with that side. Good job. Okay, now, it's a little shorter than your artboard on the top there. There you go. So now it's all the same. Now highlight everything. So just click and drag until you select everything. Click and drag. There you go. And right click, make clipping mask. There you go. So now it will kind of constrain it in that proportion. Now if you need to make adjustments, you can double click inside the clipping mask and it will adjust for you. So good job. Excellent. Very well done. And then also, this is if you were to use a colored background. If you were to just use a plain white background, I'll show you what it would look like. If you just wanted a white background, you didn't want to do color or weren't planning on doing color, you can change the color or the opacity of your, you can do something like this. and you'll still need a clipping mask. This way it has kind of a cool effect. Remember, for your clipping mask, no stroke, no fill. You want to make sure it is arranged to the front. And then highlight everything. Make clipping mask. And so that's kind of neat for a white background. That gives a really cool depth. And you can even change the color of your, like if you wanted to do yellow, there's kind of a neat, interesting background. So I want you guys to experiment, have some fun. This is kind of a neat way to add some visual interest to your layout without having to, use graphics or any imagery like that. Are there any questions about this tutorial? Very well done, Crystal and Linda. Thank you very much for attempting it. Okay, so we're going to, it looks like we're going to be running out of some time, so we better jump right into the demo for the assignment. Oh no, it's okay. I don't mind. Sometimes it's hard. I'm going really fast and it's hard to catch all the steps. So let's go ahead and do our demo. Let me get the assignment 2 laid out. Go ahead and keep Illustrator open if you'd like. We're going to do this it can be done in Illustrator or InDesign. I've got Illustrator open, so that's what I'm going to use. If you go to File, New, we got to create the right dimensions. So a new document dialog box will pop up, and we want to adjust the width. We want this to be in inches. So the width is 5.5 and the height is 8.5. And it can be portrait or landscape. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and do landscape because I'm going to show you how to do that picnic layout because I thought that was a perfect. I'll do, let's do one. And then you do need to set up, let's see, it doesn't look like you need any bleed for this one. So we'll leave that at 0. Color mode, we want CMYK color. Remember we were talking about that earlier. And then hit create. And there you go, you've got your artboard set up, okay? Now, you have to design your grand opening invitation for one of your clients, which is either the toy store, the bank, the restaurant, or the Paramount Computer Company. And you're already given copy to use, okay? So the copy, I'm going to copy it and kind of paste it in here, whoops, so that we have it. Here we go. So here's my copy. This is what I need to pull from. This is what I need to make look interesting instead of just putting text on a page. So I'm going to move it up here so it's out of the way just for now so I can stylize what I want to do. I'm going to show you. If you want to open up your layers, go to Window, click on Layers. Layers box will pull up. And I'm going to go grab that picnic layout so that I can demo that for you. It'll let me throw it in. There we go. All right, so layer 1, I want you to name as background. Background, okay? And then if you lock it, this will lock the layout, so the layer, so you can't move it around. It's really helpful when you're designing anything in layers so that you don't move stuff around, because when you're working with a lot of elements, it's hard to kind of navigate. But this one, I'm gonna kind of just eyeball you can either lay out the layout, but since it's a different size, I'm not gonna be using it. I'm just gonna kind of gauge, kind of eyeball the size. Okay. My second layer will be my type. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and lay this out kind of like you see it here. So I'll put it right here on this side. Gonna see what I'm doing. Okay, you're cordially invited to the, so I'm gonna grab that text, put it here. I'm gonna grab a font that is approved. I'm gonna use, let's see, is Minion Pro one of those? I think it's Minion Pro. Or maybe I can use Times New Roman. I forget. I don't have the list in front of me. Okay, Minion Pro. Okay, so I'm going to use Minion Pro because I like Minion Pro. We'll use Minion Pro regular. You're cordially invited, and then I'm going to the grand opening is going to be our star of the show. So we want this to shine. It's going to be in a separate text box. And I want to make sure that it's Minion Pro as well. And I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to make it extremely large. So first thing I want to do is grab my character, go to type character. I'm going to grab my character box so I can do all my formatting here. So this is my size. I'm going to just make it larger than life. I'm going to do all caps. You have all this space across the page, so don't be afraid to use it. I kind of shrink the font down until it shows up. There we go. So I've got grand opening right there. And I want this to be bold. Perfect. Again, we're going for contrast, right? So I've got, the main thing here is I've got my grand opening stretched across the entire page. That's the important thing. Also, there's a little dividers, little embellishments that you can add, like lines that act great as dividers. This will be a stroke. I'm going to do, actually going to do gray because I want my font to be gray. Let's see. This one I want to be yellow. I want it to stand out. Kind of an orange, kind of an ugly orange. Let me go to my swatches and see if it has a better color. That's too hard on the eyes, so we're gonna okay, we'll stick with orange. That's fine. Okay, and then I'm gonna grab another. With my smart guides on, this is allowing me to center everything. It's showing me the intersect line where everything lines up, okay? The rest of my text is going to be gray. And this can stand to be a little larger as well. There we go. And now you do need to edit it. The grand opening of our new store branch location, you have to choose one. So our new store will be the one I choose. I'll highlight that. Make sure everything lines up with my smart guides. Kind of center this line in between. I want this to be a little larger since it's part of the headline. You kind of have to experiment. Make sure your text box lines up. Everything's flush. That's what I'm going to be looking for. Is everything aligned properly? I'm going to do this a little different than the layout that they have. Just like that. All right, so I've got my headline. Notice how grand opening is the main headline. Got my subheaders that are small. And next, it's time for the information, okay? Come celebrate with us. Christina Aguilera is going to be performing. This is all important information. Again, I'm going to line it up right here. Now, this information needs to be small, but I'm going to use Futura because we want a contrasting font. It does not need to be large, so I'm going to, whoops, too small. Hang on. I'm going to shrink it down because I don't want it to be the same size as what I've already got. Okay, let's see what else they've got going on here. We have the dates, and the dates are pretty interesting. I'm going to have this go, you can either have it stretch across or you can kind of block it. Now remember, we talked about kind of offsetting the text a little bit so it stands out. That's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to make it stand out by picking that color, that orange that I was using, and I'm going to draw a box. Let's see, where do we want this box? Probably right here. And I want a very thin stroke on it. And no fill. And I'm going to put the dates in here. This is kind of a neat way to make it stand out as well. So again, I'm going to use the gray font. Needs to be the same color gray. There we go. And these are in separate boxes for a reason, because I need to format them. This one I can bold so it really stands out. And I can either have it line up with the information. I don't really like the way that looks, so I'm still going to have it kind of under here. There we go. So I've got my date set apart. Then the next thing I need is my call information. And that's all going to get lined up, that same ruler. The spacing between my box and my paragraph needs to be the same as below. So you kind of need to make sure you're doing it correctly. Now, as we're moving down the line, I need to start making this information a little smaller. Remember that upside down pyramid we were talking about? But I still want everything to line up really nice. Kind of move everything in a little bit. Okay, and then the last but not least is all this other information, and that can be really, really small here towards the bottom. Just like this. And I'm even going to make it smaller because it's not the important information. This is not what we need to know. But I am going to format it a little differently. So I'm going to go to Type, Glyphs, and I'm going to find a really cool divider. And that's how I'm going to space everything out. Double click on it. Just like that. All right, so I've got that formatted. I can even play with the tracking a little bit so it can extend across the page. Yeah, just like the fine print. I mean, it's not too small. you can still read it. I mean, it's 9 point, but it's much smaller than the rest of the information. So just notice how as I'm moving down the information, it's getting smaller and smaller. Okay. Yeah, and then all that's left is your logo. You just need your logo nice and small somewhere. This can be a perfect place for it. And in this case, I'm going to move this down. You could even do something different. I'm going to try to play around with this a little bit. Bear with me for just a minute. I'm just going to kind of see if I like something differently. I'm going to see what this would look like if I put it on a different line and just hit tab. I don't know if it has the same effect, but yeah, I liked it the way it was before. So we'll just keep it. Oops. Want good spacing. Another thing you could do is you could use this divider line. I'm going to make it a lot smaller, 0.5 point. You can also use it to kind of separate your information, line it up with the other line. Just like that. Or you can even, add some, I don't like that. Let's try this one. Let's go solid and basic. There you go. Could do something like that, or find the center of the page. You can kind of do like a divider. Oops. And I'm just going to grab some color. Make it nice and small. You could make these dividers orange. You can make them the same color. So that adds some color as well. And then your logo could go over here on the right side as kind of a balancing act. Or here's what you could do is if you go back to your artwork, grab your really cool starburst design. And this is where you can place your design. And I will make it a little bit more visual. Let me right click, send it to the back. And then I'll grab I have to make a clipping mask so that it's not hanging over the edge. No fill on the clipping mask. Right click, bring it to front, and then highlight everything on your artboard. The whole thing. Right click, make clipping mask. So now you've got a really cool layout, and you can change the color of your starburst if you want. See if I can find a gray that works nice. You can do something like that. But hopefully this gives you an idea of what you're looking for. We will jump right back into the slides so you can see how hierarchy is supposed to be, how it's supposed to be laid out. This is more of a landscape. I'll show you how to do a portrait one. We might go over time a little bit, but if you have to go, that's fine. You can just catch the last part of the recording. Let's stop the share. I'm going to share my PowerPoint slides just because I think it's important to go over these few basic principles, things you're going to be graded on. Okay, let's skip here. Okay, alignment, text alignment. It's very important that you have readability. Left alignment is always best when you're laying out, okay? What's the other thing that I want you to know? This is what I'm going to be talking about when I say your horizontal line needs to be matching up. You need to line everything up, okay? On left align, the right align, everything, and you really need to make sure lines of text line up together, especially if you're gonna have them in columns. This is your vertical alignment. Okay, you need to use your rulers and guides so that you can guide yourself on where you're laying things out. Make sure your smart guides are turned on. This is the edge of your text. You need to make sure everything has a ruler alongside it, and make sure that you're lining everything so the top of your type will match with the other type that you're using. This is the center. Okay. And then again, this text on the left is properly aligned according to the precise measurements of this design, which means they're using a ruler and all the text is touching in the same place. So it's left aligned perfectly. There's nothing hanging over that ruler. So use your rulers when you're lining this up. This is white space. Have an even amount of white space below your headline and your body copy as you do the other groups of text that you have. So if you'll remember my example, I had same amount of white space that I was using. Let's look at, this is active and passive. Okay, look at this. Text is easy to read because the margins and line spacing are large enough to avoid cluttering in the space. If you look at the one below, super cluttered. It's very hard to read. There's no white space. This just really makes it more difficult. It lessens the readability here. So the idea is to give yourself some spacing, some breathing room, elbow room, and make everything even. The spacing around the white space around your text and between your text needs to be even all across your design. All right, let's look at line breaks. Some of us kind of aren't sure of the terminology. So widow is that one word hanging off the end of your column. You do not want this. At least have a minimum of 2 or 3 words at the end of your paragraph. If there's only one word, try to expand your text box a little bit so that it will pull up. Right now it's thinking like that. You want to adjust it as best you can. So we don't want that widow. We don't want that one word hanging off. What's an orphan? You've heard me say avoid widows and orphans. Orphans is that if you're doing columns on a page, that one line that just kind of hangs at the top of the page that really does belong with that other paragraph. So it's that extra word or two that's hanging off on the kind of in its column all of itself. And so we really want to make it a part of that paragraph. Right now it looks really disconnected. So we want to avoid that. So avoid widows and orphans whenever possible. Use adequate contrast in style and weight. Here's an example. They're using all caps and they use kind of a fancy font just to highlight things. They use color to add emphasis. Let's see, we talked about avoiding too many fonts in your layout. I use 2 fonts with mine. Here's the idea of hierarchy. If you look on the left, this is how you should be laying out your article. The word hierarchy could easily be replaced with grand opening. That crown could easily be replaced with your logo. Organizes and directs can be, you're cordially invited to, or I guess what's the text of our new store. And then the next line, level 3, can just be the information. Level 2 can be the dates. And then the fine print here at the bottom. So it's kind of structured the same way. This is just in a vertical layout. All right, we're gonna have time for videos today, but I did want to kind of move through this. Oh yeah, this is a good one. When you're working with type and color, I want you to ensure that sufficient contrast exists between your background color and your type. So if you're using a dark color like that dark blue I was using for my gradient, I'd want to use as light of a font as I can find. So white would probably be more appropriate. So if I'm going to use a light background, I really do want to use a dark contrasting font. So just remember, they're going to be opposite of each other. So colors with the same saturation really will fight for attention. So you really want one to take the obvious lead. If you look at this example here, the one on the top and the one on the bottom are the winners because they're easily read, but the ones in between, they're actually harder to read. So light on light doesn't work. Dark font on dark backgrounds doesn't work. So if you have a dark background, you want as light of a font as you can find. Usually it's white. Principles of design. This is very important. You will be held accountable for it. Contrast, emphasis. We talked a little bit about this earlier. See here, contrast is just if you have a light font, you want to use a dark background. If you have a dark background, you want to use a light font. Repetition. Repetition is important. I used repetition in my layout with the lines, the embellishments that I was using. That was kind of a theme throughout. Also, the gray that I was using was a theme throughout. Alignment. I made sure everything was aligned vertically and horizontally. Everything has even amount of white space and balance to the layout. And proximity and grouping. I made sure my grouping was even. My sections of text were sectioned off differently, but there's even amount of space and they're lined up. So that's how I grouped my information. It's easy to read, it flows easy. Just all you need to be considered is just implementing your typography and making sure everything kind of holds true to these principles. All right. We won't have time for this, but I will show you an example. I'm going to go back to Illustrator and I will demo a very quick and dirty vertical alignment layout for you. If you go to New, Document, I'll show you a vertical alignment. It's 5.5 inches by, let me double check that, by 8.5. And I want this portrait, one artboard. So click OK. All right, so the one I'm going to do, I found for a restaurant that I thought was kind of neat right here. Steak night. Okay, this is a very simple way to lay out something, but it has some embellishments. The logo is small and at the bottom. This is a really cool layout for a restaurant. So I thought I would do that in case any of you are planning on doing your layout for a restaurant. So layer 1 is going to be my background. Let's see, example. Layer 2 will be my background. And layer 3 will be my text. Notice how they're in different, I don't know if you've worked with layers before, but they're in different colors so that I know which layer I'm on. So for my example layer, I'm just going to kind of position it here at the top. I might make it a little bigger so that the idea here is I'm just trying to get it to fit the page. Okay, I'm going to lock that. So now it's locked in, and now all I need to do is kind of eyeball where I'm going to place my elements. Okay, this is just going to help me gauge size and placement. So now I'm going to go to my my text layer, and I'm going to go to my type tool, and this is where I'm going to go grab that information. Let's see, I'll grab it from the website. Oops. All right, please no drop shadows on your layouts as well. I saw a lot of that going on with logo design, and honestly, you don't need a drop shadow. If you need a drop shadow, that means your text is too light or too dark and can't be read on your background. So that's a good indicator that you just need to adjust your color. All right, you're cordially invited. So a good placement for our logo would probably go here. This will be our logo. And on the background, the example layer, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring down the opacity quite a bit. So that I can see my text as I'm typing, but this is just going to give me an idea. All right, so my logo's here. You are cordially invited to the, that'll be a new text box. I'll do Times New Roman. I'm going to do italics. And I'll place it right here. And this is just so that I can see my font. Next, I need grand opening. And again, I'm going to make it Times New Roman. And I'm going to grab under my type tool here, grab my character box. This allows me to format my text without having to go to too many places. So I want all caps, just like you see in the example. I want it bold. I'm going to adjust my leading so it's nice and tight, but I want a big font. And I'm going to try to get that font as close to the size of theirs. See you, Hillary. Thanks for coming. So I'm going to line it up, make sure my smart guides snap it into place. Now opening is probably going to need to be a little smaller. Maybe these probably have to be a little smaller. I'm going to let grand be a little bigger. I'm going to get grand to line up with opening, just like that. I'm going to change the font to white, no stroke. Okay, so grand opening there, and I can hide my example at any time if I want to see what's going on. For my background color, I'm going to use the exact same color they're using. And I'm going to grab my eyedropper tool, click on that, accept. Hang on. My background, go to the color. I want that deep maroon that they're using. There we go. Now I can hide my background color, or I can at least see what I'm doing. The cordially invited to needs to be white as well. Take off the stroke, make sure it's white. Okay, now I can see what I'm doing. I can bring back my example and hide my background. Oops, hide my background color. And now of our new location or our new store, I'll do location. And I'll place it directly under here. I'll copy this formatting. And for balance, I'm going to put it on the right side, but I'm going to line it up and make sure my text box and everything lines up correctly. Okay, next I'm going to grab a line, just like I was doing earlier. In this case, they had a really thick line. So I'm going to change this to white, or no, they had a color, whatever your color is. Let's go here. Switch. I'm going to adjust the opacity on it a little bit. Hold down Shift as you move it over. Make sure your lines snap into place. Make sure this is centered with the word. So the title needs to be in with the body, not with the logo, correct? Or does it matter? I'm not quite sure I understand your question. The title is kind of on it's in a group of its own. You want to try to reword that so I can make sure I understand it? The logo TIB, title Toscano Bistro, or whatever. Only if they prompt you to do that. Because what I see, I'm just using the text they've given me. So I'm not seeing it. It just says location. See you, Ashley. Thanks for coming. So your logo can go anywhere. You can place it here at the top. You wanted your logo here, nice and small. Or you can place it here at the bottom. You only need to place it one time on the page. And then here's where I'll put the other information. So I'll just grab it from here since I've already got it formatted. I'm going to change this to white so we can read it. And I do not want widows, so I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to check and see how I'm doing on my example. So I'm going to hide everything else and display my look. So looks like I'm doing pretty good. So let's do this. I'm going to add some space. There we go. That's lining up on the left, really nice. 2-seated dinner parties. I'm going to grab my dates that are already formatted. I'm going to kind of paste it over. I'm going to center this. Center this one as well. I'm just going to grab that color that I've been using, that orange. This is too dark, so you can't see it. So I'm going to kind of brighten it. This box is too dark, so I'm going to brighten it as well. I'm going to do white around it. So we got kind of my formatting under control. I'm going to grab this call information and my fine print, and I'm going to place it on my layout here. So if I were to move my logo here at the top, that could be a good place to put it. And then my fine print here can go, I'm going to make this white. In this case, there we go. And then under here, I'm gonna make this white as well so it stands out. And I want this to be the same font size. It's going to be a little smaller than the text above it. Just like that. All right, so now I've got my layout. This is my logo here up top. I've got all the information that I needed, and that's all I need. So that's how you format the vertical part. Now, if I wanted to add some visual interest, I could use my starburst, or I could go back to our texture, which I think I'm going to use on this one because I think the texture would add a really nice touch. I'm going to put it on my background. And this will add a really nice touch to my layout, kind of give it a little bit more dimension. Just like that. So that is kind of what you're going to be expected to do. Be paying attention to the spacing. I want even amount of spacing between your elements right here. Even amount of spacing. I want everything aligned, center aligned. If I were to grab my ruler, I go to my rulers, show rulers. I want everything to kind of line up at the dead center of this page. Okay, so everything needs to be center aligned. Everything also needs to make sure if it's grouped that it lines up together. All right. Are there any questions before we end? Thanks for hanging with me. Sorry we went over a few minutes. Hopefully this assignment's clear. You kind of get the idea. Google, flyer design, poster design, and kind of see what's being done out there. And you can use examples to help guide you. All right, if there's no questions, we're going to go ahead and end. I will see you guys on Thursday for the multi-session, same time, 7:30 to 9:30 Mountain Standard Time. And come bring questions, bring your assignment. If you want to pass it off, you can get a grade there in class. So just bring it to me to review. Otherwise, you guys have a great night. Thanks for coming.